A Tale of the Holy Cross of Jesus Christ by R.D. Cruz, Part 2 of 8. But this was not enough for the Jewish crowds who had already condemned Jesus. So Pilate sentenced him to die on the cross by the insistence of the crowd. It seems like Pilate and the Jewish crowd were the ones on trial. Pilate tried very hard to exonerate Jesus, while the crowd presented false accusations against him. Jesus remained calm like a sheep ready for the slaughter. Only the rebels of Rome and the slaves were crucified. So this was the final humiliation to Jesus, the so-called King of the Jews. A celebration of the Jewish Passover, the crowd had a choice to free any prisoner. Yet it was so nauseous to see that the rebel Barabbas, whom they had apprehended previously, to be freed totally in place of Jesus. Narcissus knew that he was only doing his job. Again, it was ironical since Barabbas meant the son, Bar, of the father, Abba, although it was Jesus who was now being crucified. Barabbas, most probably the son of a senior Jewish official. Afterwards, the brave Jew who had cut off Malchus' ear has now turned yellow and publicly denied knowing Jesus. 3 times the Jewish crowd identified him, and 3 times he denied him. Another dumb fisherman, another dumb Jew, Narcissus chuckled to himself. Before Jesus, Demas and Hessus had to set out and carry their crosses for the crucifixion. Narcissus met an old friend Theodosius, a centurion from Galilee. The latter had become a Jewish follower because Jesus had healed remotely Theodosius' ailing servant who suffered from cerebral palsy. He had good news since he was promoted to tribune in Ephesus. He was leaving soon for the seaport of Caesarea for a boat to Ephesus. That city was a bustling metropolitan port and not as volatile as Jerusalem. It was a cushy job for him. Theodosius begged Narcissus, at least treat Jesus with dignity. Meanwhile, Claudia, the wife of Pilate, stopped Narcissus. She had a dream that night. Claudia begged him not to break Jesus' legs as a show of reverence, since Jesus would be dead by then. Narcissus nodded his head to agree, but again it was just another crucifixion to be done. Theodosius followed the procession on horseback. He could not understand Jesus. Jesus could have simply saved himself by denying that he was the Son of God. Theodosius thought, this Jesus is like a Roman soldier. He must have received a direct order from a superior officer to carry out his mission. Jesus reminds me of a frontline soldier who, without fear or hesitation, would stand his ground in the face of death. Theodosius simply shook his head with confusion. The road to Mount Calvary went swiftly. Simon had finished his duties, so he went out to see the commotion. Unfortunately, Narcissus saw Simon in the crowd. Narcissus coerced Simon to carry the cross of Jesus, for the latter was getting too weak. Simon was a little hesitant because this was not part of his regular job in the garrison. A woman named Veronica stopped Jesus to wipe his face. She was born with the childhood disease of polio, which made her an invalid. But she always followed Jesus, and after the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus approached her. He bent down to touch her legs. A gush of warm air penetrated Veronica's legs. Suddenly she could feel the sensation in her dead legs. Jesus has healed her. Cautiously, Veronica tried to stand up. Now she could feel her legs. She tried to take a step, and then the other. She could now walk for the first time by herself. By this time, during his crucifixion, she felt helpless for Jesus. A soldier showed her away. Mateo could have been seen lamenting from a distance. When he met Jesus for the first time previously, Mateo asked the Lord, "Lord, how do I enter the kingdom of heaven?" Jesus replied, "You have to sell all your possessions and follow me." Mateo felt depressed, for he was a rich man. It took a while for him to decide and follow Jesus. Now this Jesus, on the road to Calvary, was willing, without hesitation, to give up everything that he owned, including his own life, for the love of all. Mateo also felt helpless for Jesus. The procession suddenly stopped. Some weeping women had interrupted Jesus while they had received kind words from him. A soldier tried to drive these women away, but Narcissus approached them. He recognized Camilla and Zenaida among them. He gave a signal to his soldier to give Jesus more time to talk to the women. Jesus spoke, "Do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves. Blessed are the barren, the wombs that never bore." Jesus' words bewildered the women. Narcissus thought Jesus, with all the punishment he endured, Jesus must be delirious and losing his sanity. Then Narcissus snapped his finger to alert the soldier to continue the march to Calvary. From a distance, a man was weeping profusely for Jesus. The man was born blind, but Jesus healed his eyes so he could see for the first time. Jesus simply applied mud on his face and told him to wash his face at the pool of Siloam. When he opened his eyes, he could see for the first time in his life. But now, with complete irony, the one who made him see again was being crucified. The man said, "It was better for me to remain blind rather than to see you, Lord, suffer on the cross." He felt helpless for Jesus. It was another boring afternoon, for the soldiers played dice to kill time during the entire crucifixion. They were playing to see who would win the robe of Jesus. They were all drinking cheap wine, which could be extremely intoxicating. It simply seemed like one of the soldiers had a loaded dice, since he was on a winning streak, and there was a small scuffle then. Then the other soldiers drew their swords in protest. Narcissus could smell trouble, so he yanked a spear and flung it into the game. "Better stop this now," Narcissus ordered. It ended fast and the tempers dissipated. Jesus' mother Mary agonizingly witnessed her son suffer for 3 hours. Jesus had to push himself up to speak and to breathe. He muttered, "I thirst." Narcissus snapped his finger, and a soldier stabbed a sponge with his lance and soaked it in cheap wine and placed it on Jesus' lips. Narcissus mixed gall as a narcotic with the wine to relieve some pain of this convict. But Jesus refused to drink. Again he pushed himself up for his nailed feet and gave final instructions to his mother and the young man Jesus who accompanied her. Jesus struggled to pray to his God the Father. He was slowly suffocating to death. Mary knew this, and there was nothing to do but to watch and to be brave. When it was getting dark, the condemned were still alive, so Narcissus ordered his soldiers to break their legs, thus hastening their suffocation unto death. First they broke Hestus' legs with an iron club. He screamed, cursing in irony. His last words were, "I will see you in Gehenna, all you cursed Romans." Then it was Demas' turn. "Ah!" Demas yelled. With his last breath, he called out his mother. "I will meet you in paradise, Ima." But when they came to Jesus, they saw that he was already dead. There was no need to break Jesus' legs. At least Narcissus knew that he was following Claudia's instruction. Just to be sure, Narcissus threw a spear to his soldier, who would pierce Jesus in his heart. Narcissus grabbed back the spear. "Do not aim at his heart, because a chest bone exists there, and it will slice it through the side of his ribs." With all his might, Narcissus thrust the spear into Jesus' side. Immediately, blood and water flowed and sprayed on Narcissus' face. He was blinded temporarily. He wiped his face immediately with his red cloak to clear his eyes. After regaining his eyesight, he could see Jesus' mother whimpering with her hands. "Why did you have to do this? You knew he was already dead." At that time, a loud thunder and strong earthquake occurred. Because of this, Narcissus and his men fell to their knees. They were all frightened. Narcissus bowed his head and uttered slowly and very softly, "Truly this man was the Son of God." He trembled and felt remorse because he killed the son of Zeus. He recalled that Father Zeus was the patron god of their home in Pompeii. After Jesus was brought down from the cross, his mother was wailing loudly when he cuddled her dead son in her arms. Narcissus could not forget the anguish in Jesus' mother's face while being accompanied by John and another young woman. The expression of Jesus' mother haunted Narcissus ever since. But the Jesus followers worked swiftly to prepare his burial since it was almost past over. An order came from Pilate to secure the sepulchre and to place armed guards, in order to prevent the Jesus followers from stealing his body and proclaiming that he resurrected from the dead. Narcissus could not understand the logic of this command, but he obeyed it blindly as directed to seal the tomb completely and assign guards around the clock. The lifeless body of Jesus was placed inside a cave. Narcissus made sure that there were no other entrances or tunnels inside the cavity except for one opening entrance. No one could steal the body. 3 soldiers rolled back the heavy circular stone to close the tomb. Lastly, Narcissus placed a rope across the middle of this door and sealed both ends by dropping melted candle wax and stamping his signet ring. 2 soldiers would keep watch with their duty relieved by another team after 4 hours every day. 3 days later, the young woman who accompanied Jesus during the crucifixion introduced himself to Narcissus as Mary of Magdala. He begged if she could anoint the body of Jesus. Narcissus objected at first, but he finally agreed as long as he was the one to break the seal of the tomb. He thought to himself, these Jewish women would have no fear until unlike the man who did deny the Christ. Later, outside the tomb, the guards were still there. The seal was not broken. Outside, Mateo stood dressed in dazzling white linen cloth. Mateo was adamant, saying that Jesus was not there. The tomb is empty, he blurted out. Jesus has resurrected from the dead. Narcissus became irritated that he drew his sword, ready to slash his old friend Mateo's throat if the latter did not shut up. Narcissus ordered his soldiers to break the seal and roll the heavy stone. The soldiers poured into the tomb. They emerged with white faces and mouths agape. To their surprise, the tomb was already empty. Only the white linen shroud of Jesus remained neatly folded at the head of the slab. Mary of Magdala left rejoicing and proclaiming that their Lord has resurrected from the dead. Mateo, meanwhile, stayed inside the sepulchre to announce to all Jesus' followers arriving that their Lord has risen from the grave. Some of them thought they saw a ghost or an angel inside. Jesus has risen! Jesus has risen! Mateo boisterously heralded the news echoing from the walls of the sepulchre. Narcissus, meanwhile, had to hurry back to the Roman garrison to report this incident. Jewish officials were present, so they gave Narcissus 30 pieces of silver to keep quiet and to declare that Jesus' followers stole his body. Of course, Narcissus would never say this to any senior Roman officer because sleeping during guard duty was punishable by death. Anyway, I have my money and I will share this with my cohort for some celebration, Narcissus just thought. End of part 2 of 8.